There have been prior discussions, there have been prior attempts, but now we are seeing serious work from the XFCE project to go and support Wayland, or as I've taken to calling it, WFCE. Don't worry, they're not actually renaming the project, and probably shouldn't go and do so. Now, unsurprisingly, the usual suspects from both the Wayland camp and the camp that hates Wayland at all costs have come out of the woodworks to go and bicker with each other. Frankly, I don't actually care what they're arguing about, so let's talk about what is actually happening. This was announced during FOSS season, which is now, over on the AlexCon software development blog. This is Alexander Schwinn's blog. He is one of the core XFCE maintainers and one of the admins in control of the money. And the money is very important here, because unlike last time where it was some third-party developer working on a thing that was outside of XFCE and wasn't really going anywhere, and that's kind of happened a couple of times, and there's been various little projects here and there, after careful consideration, we've decided on a meaningful way to use the generous donations from our community, funding longtime XFCE core developer Brian Tarracon to create XFWL4, which is a very awkward name to say, and I'm going to try to avoid saying it the rest of the video, a brand new Wayland compositor for XFCE. Brian, in case you don't know, also goes by Kelnos within the project and various spaces online. XFCE basically doesn't spend money, and we'll get more into this a bit later, but the fact that they are actually paying a developer to work on this, paying a core developer in the project, this is actually a serious attempt at making this happen. Now, as you might expect, the goal here isn't to go and create some massively new workflow. The goal is to create something that is on par, that is in line with what is available on the X11 side. Now, obviously, there are areas where protocol discussions are still going on. Things have not been fully ironed out in that regard, but long-term, somewhere down the line, that's the goal. Early on, most of the experience is going to be there, though. And this, I think, is very interesting. XFWL4 will not be based on the existing XFWM4 code, that is their X11 window manager. Instead, it will be written from scratch in Rust using Smithay building blocks. Smithay, I think, is actually really cool that it's getting this attention. So, this is not what people would traditionally build a window manager, a compositor on. Traditionally, that would be WL Roots. That was started by the Sway project. That's what Hyperland originally started on. It's what DWL was built on. It's what a bunch of other projects all were built on. Smithay, this was started by Victoria Breckenfeld, now working at System 76, and obviously is being used by the Cosmic desktop. Niri, which is what I'm using, also makes use of Smithay. This is a growing option, and especially if you want to build an environment using Rust, this is basically the best option there is. And it's not the best option because there's no other options. It's the best option because this is actually a really good option. And when you have someone actually employed to go and work on a project, which Victoria is still doing, things tend to get better pretty quickly. As we go, we'll talk more about this, but I want to highlight one very specific line. Using XFWL4 should feel just like using XFWM4 on X11. This is not a situation where X11 support is being dropped. I have two separate instances of XFCE people saying they are not getting rid of the X11 side. Someone asked, so I guess the X11 version of XFCE will still exist for some time in their development then. The person said, as long as Oliver or any other person keeps maintaining / patching XFWM4, as long as someone is working on it, they are not getting rid of it. Here is another one. Who said you had to use Wayland? X11 support isn't going away, whatever GNOME devs say. I do appreciate the little bit of snark towards the, towards some of the usual suspects who talk about X11 being killed. Now, very importantly, why doing a rewrite? Why not just add it as part of the main XFWM4 codebase? XFWM4 is architected in a way that makes it very difficult to put the window management behavior behind generic interfaces that don't include X11 specifics. when you have a code base that is built off of a 30-year history of only supporting X11, it kind of makes sense why it would be very tied to X11. And going back to what I said before about them not dropping X11 anytime soon, refactoring XFWM4 is risky since it might introduce new bugs to X11. Having two parallel codebases will allow for rapid development and experimentation with the Wayland compositor with zero risk to break XFWM4. This is a problem that both GNOME and KDE ran into with Mutter and Kwin respectively. As they were working on the Wayland side and nobody was really maintaining the X11 side, the X11 side gradually got worse and worse and worse because it was relying on changes that were being made to improve the Wayland side. So if you have them in separate code bases, assuming dependencies don't get weird and things like that, the X11 side just keeps working as it's always worked. Some X11 window management concepts just aren't available or supported by Wayland protocols at this time, and dealing with those differences can be difficult in an X11 first codebase. This is something that Kelnos has spoken more about over on Hacker News. I'll do my best. It won't be exactly the same, of course, but it will be as close as I can get. As an example, focus stealing prevention. Focus stealing prevention is a place where I think XFWL4 could be at an advantage over XFWM4. XFWM4 does a great job at focus stealing prevention, but it has to work on a bunch of heuristics, and sometimes it just does the wrong thing, and there's not much we can do about it. Wayland's model plus XDG activation should at least make the focus or don't focus decision much more consistent. There's also the question of the compositing overhead. I'm not sure yet, but I suspect your fears are well founded here. On modern and even not so modern hardware, even low-end GPUs should be fine with all of this. On my 4-year-old laptop with Intel graphics, I can't tell the difference performance-wise with XFWM4's compositor on or off, but I know people run XFCE and X11 on very not modern hardware, and those people may unfortunately be left behind, but we'll see. And again, there is still the X11 version if the Wayland side is not going to work for you. And using the existing codebase would require us to use C and W roots, even if a better alternative is available. Now, you could go and write some Smithay C bindings if you really wanted to do so, but that's basically a whole project unto itself, and nobody wants to do that. Maybe somebody does, but Kelnos doesn't. Kelnos has also commented on why the project is being done just to begin with. I'm also not a big fan of Wayland, to be honest, but that's the way the winds are blowing. X11 has its problems, but even if they are fixable, no one seems to want to work on Xorg anymore. I'm certainly not prepared to maintain it and push it forward. Are you? Depending on Xorg today is more or less okay, but I do expect distros will stop shipping it eventually. I would probably expect something like Fedora to do so first. At least, besides things that only offer a single environment, like, a Bazite, for example. But this is a problem that every environment is going to have to deal with. There will come a point where Canonical says, okay, we don't want to keep supporting X11. We don't want to keep Xorg around. And at that point, you have to say, okay, well, we need a Wayland environment, or we're not going to be on that distro. And that might not be something that everybody's happy about. I know projects like XLibre are work in progress. There is the Phoenix server. There is things like Wayback in development. But all of those things are kinda early on, and we don't really know how all of them are going to play out. Next, we have the important question: why Smithay? Why not the other option of WL roots? Technically, Mir is also an option, but Mir is still a couple of years away for a big, serious project to go and use it. There are some window managers and things like that, but I wouldn't start something on Mir right now, at least. Smithay supports most, if not all, official Wayland protocol extensions, as well as the WRoots protocol and some KDE protocols. Obviously, WRoots is in basically the same position as well. They have pretty similar coverage. Smithay has no high-level abstraction as WRoots has. However, it allows for very deep customization of the graphics and input pipeline, as well as all aspects of the Wayland protocols and desktop/shell handling. Smithay has great documentation. And a big part of that, again, is somebody is paid to work on the project. When you're given money, it's usually a pretty good incentive to do things. Obviously, Victoria is not the only person who works on the project. There are a bunch of other people as well. But most projects tend to have, like, a person who is the primary contributor, and that is what Victoria is. And again, she is paid money to work on the project. And of course, being Rust, using Rust makes it easier to avoid memory-related bugs and decreases the chances of crashes, something that should never happen for a Wayland compositor. I know there's a lot of the Rust bad programmer, use Rust discourse, all this stuff, but Brian kind of prefers doing stuff in Rust over C. Now, I've discussed this before, and every programmer knows this. Rust is not unique at dealing with memory-related bugs, but it does do things better in that regard than C. C obviously gives you a lot of control. The problem with control is it lets you do stupid things. Rust gives you most of the control you need, cutting out some of the dumb things. I'm not getting into it here. I've talked about it in prior videos. Just do a Google search on why people like Rust. I don't know. And of course, wroots is written in C in a way that makes it very difficult to write wroots Rust bindings. This links to a piece I've covered in the past on the Way Cooler project and the developers basically giving up on it. So this was an attempt to build basically awesome WM, but on Wayland. And the developer also was working on Rust bindings for wroots, and basically never got started on the main project because that was a massive endeavor. Work for this project has already started, but at least for the initial version, we should be seeing it sometime around mid-year. We'll see how that actually plays out, if things get delayed, if it happens sooner. I doubt it's going to happen sooner. Usually plans tend to run on rather than happen early. But we'll see. Now, I want to talk about the money discourse, the idea that XFCE is just wasting all of their donations by working on this project. I have two things to say to this. Firstly, XFCE basically doesn't spend any of their money. Pretty much what they spend it on is the minimal cost to keep their infrastructure going. Everything else was just sitting in the open collective, basically gathering dust, pretty much doing nothing. Secondly, if you were donating to XFCE and didn't know they were interested in doing a Wayland version, frankly, that's a skill issue. I have been talking about this for 4 years now. I'm not the only one who's been talking about this. The XFCE devs have been talking about this. If you didn't know they were interested in Wayland and you were donating money to them under the assumption that they would never support Wayland, I don't know what to say to you besides that's a skill issue. This is something that was also brought up on Hacker News. Wow, this is annoying. I really like XFCE, but there are plenty of minor things which would need improvements. Instead of fixing all these minor things, they waste a lot of their donations on a rewrite for Wayland/Rust, apparently for exactly the same reason as all the other Wayland stuff and Rust reworks. Developers like to write new code more than actually maintaining, improving, and fixing existing things, and find some excuse to do this. From Kelnos, that's a fair criticism sometimes, but frankly, if you want things the way you want them, learn to code and dig in. Otherwise, it's not really fair of you to complain about stuff that people have built for you for free in their spare time. In this particular case, it's not fully a new and shiny must-play situation. I personally am not even a big fan of Wayland, and I'm generally highly critical of it. But Xorg is more or less unmaintained, and frankly, if we don't have a Wayland compositor, will become obsolete eventually. That's just the way the wind is blowing. And I understand that some people might think this is a stupid reason to go and do something. But I do respect the fact that we have a developer here who is looking out for the best of the project. They don't necessarily like Wayland themselves, but they understand that this needs to be here for the health of the project and for the future of the project, and they are the ones who are working on doing so. Now, I'll say it once again, the X11 side is not going away anytime soon. Things are specifically being architected to not have to go and remove the X11 session. The Wayland session is its own separate code base that is not affecting the X11 side. X11, as long as there is somebody maintaining XFWL4 or whatever version they call it in the future, this is going to stick around. If you want it to stick around, if you want things to improve, get involved with the project. Even just basic things. Just get involved with the project in some way, whether it's donating, whether it's helping out with issues, whether it's submitting code, help out the project. X11 is not being treated as a stain on XFCE, but it still needs work to keep things working. So, let me know. Are you an XFCE user? What do you think about this change? Are you excited to see Wayland? Would you prefer it to just not exist? Do you understand where Brian is coming from, that this kind of needs to be here for the future of the project? I'd love to know. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Go like the video if you liked the video, and if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribe Starly Bearer page linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and took him long enough.